Hey everybody, this is Dan again from Starter Build. We're doing another episode of Starter Build here where we take a ship and basically throw in some gear that you can get from level 50 and get started with the reputation and see how things go from there. So today we actually have a special episode because this one is going to be about the Nandi Warship, which is from the summer event. And I can show you here if I go to Reputation and Events. If I set an active project, I've actually already gotten the ship this week, so basically I'll be able to show you that. This is basically just saying exchange vouchers for marks, so I can keep doing daily missions to get the extra reputation marks, which I don't really need right now, but we'll get into that later. So I have the package here in my inventory for the Ferengi Warship. So basically we're going to open this up here. Ferengi Nandi Warship, I got that, so I'm going to rename this just something casual here. Alright, we'll save that the way it is. Alright, welcome back. So I basically just wanted to show you guys the bridge of this thing, because it's actually very unique, and that it does have some options that most other bridges do not. First off, we have the appearance of a standard Ferengi-looking vessel. I don't have the Marauder because that is a lockbox ship, which is a little more on the expensive side on the exchange, or based on using the keys on the lockboxes. But in any case, that actually is a two-piece bonus with this ship as far as the consoles go. But I'll show you guys that, well, if I get that. But in the meantime, we're not going to worry about that. But in any case, what we have here is actually a little more than you would normally get in a standard ready room, because normally you would get the account bank and that's it. But on here, what we have is trader, which basically is another set of duty officer missions here. We also have the Davo table here. So that's kind of cool. You can actually just do that right here. I'm actually not going to do that myself, but you also can access the bank, both your character bank and the account bank from this bridge. Normally you can only access the account bank, so there's that. Also the exchange, so you can do any sort of exchange transactions here, like I was looking for the disruptor turrets to make this kit here. But yeah, so you can actually do all of that from within your ship, which is nice. So if you're out on a mission, you don't have to warp back or transwarp back to Earth Space Dock or Kronos or New Romulus or whatever. You can do that all from right here in the bridge, just by clicking this down arrow and going to visit Starship Bridge. So that's a pretty awesome feature about this ship. So I just want to show you guys that. I also have the somewhat authentic looking transporters for the Ferengi vessel here. And the captain's chair, fairly basic, but in any case, that is the bridge of the Nandi Warship, so let's go out into space and show you what the ship can do here. Alright, so now we're in space here, and I made a fairly standard build for this, just based on parts that, again, you would get from either mission rewards or essentially just items you could buy off the exchange pretty cheaply. So basically that is basically a frugal build at this point. But it's also for the sake of people who are just starting out and want to start in the reputation system but don't have the proper build yet. This is just something to, food for thought, really. And another thing that I was wondering personally when I first was told about this ship online was basically that I know that they sort of borrowed the design a little bit from the Marauder and tweaked it a bit, so you can kind of see it has the Marauder look to a point, but they kind of took the wings off of the back, put them on the front, and basically the big confusion for me was which side is the front, and this is just the it is the bridge on this side, and that is the front when you're going forward, and this is the aft which kind of looks like a giant insect. But in any case, cosmetics aside, let me kind of get into it here about how the build is set up. Now, I did do something with this build that I don't like to do, but if you are an event ship person, you may have already unlocked the Kabali Samsar, which I'll take a look at in a different video. But from that ship, I actually took the Kabali field stabilizing warp core here, just because it's the best fit for this build that I'm showing off here. So that is something that if you don't have the Kabali Samsar, you'll either have to get it from the Lobby store, or if you have it on another character, you can actually redeem it through the reputation system by going up here to reputation and then down to events and the store. You can actually reclaim anything. There's a new feature this year that you can reclaim any ships you've unlocked on a previous character or an alternate character from other events. That's actually kind of a nice little feature. So if you have 3 or 4 characters, especially after the Delta Recruit setup, you'll have the ability to give that extra character this ship right off once you unlock it. So that's kind of an awesome little Easter egg here that they threw in for this event. And also, like I said, it applies to previous event ships, so that's a great bonus. So in any case, going back to the build here, I did use the Kabali set because the way that I have this set up, this ship is 4 forward weapons, 4 aft, and it's actually one of the rare setups like this where you can actually equip dual cannons or dual heavy cannons, which is kind of a bonus because people who like cannons can definitely use them on this thing, and that's awesome. So in any case, I use the Kabali set here. What this does for me, the big things here are for the boost and hull repair, shield emitters, structural integrity, shield system. It's basically just a don't die build. So that is actually the Kabali set, the deflector, the engines here, the hyper impulse engines, and the Kabali regenerative shield. Those all come from the previous featured episode, which is no longer featured. It's the final one in the Delta Rising arc called Dust to Dust. Basically, it's from this one here. You have to play it about 3 times total to get those 3 parts. But it's actually a fairly easy mission. When it was a featured episode, you could literally beat it at level 10. It would scale, villains to your level, but in any case, you can get those fairly quickly because that mission is relatively easy. But that aside, that's my set that I'm using here. So the other big bonuses with using a multi-piece set is that you get those, set bonuses. So we have the Kabali reactive hull generation here, which at this point doesn't really make a big difference, probably because of the skills that I have set up. I'm not going to get into skills or traits so much into these videos, just because I don't want to throw too much at you. This is just kind of a get in, get started, and test drive the ship essentially. So anyway, back to the bonuses from the sets here. So we have the Kabali nanite screen, which what that means is that anytime you receive damage while at 25% or less hull, you have a 100% chance, which means it's always going to happen, to apply the nanite screen, which is a 15,000 hull temporary hit points 15 seconds, which is kind of an awesome save your ass button, but it's actually a passive ability, so you don't have to manually activate it, which is great. Now, because I'm using the warp core of this set, I do have the reactive nanite screen, which is an active ability. I tend to compare it to the miracle worker for an engineering captain, which I also use. So it's kind of redundant to that if you're playing as an engineer, but it does mean if you do have the Kabali 4-piece, you can play with a tactical captain and basically use that reactive nanite screen to rescue yourself, when desperate. But in any case, that's that set. So if you're familiar with that set already, great. I personally really like it, especially on my newer builds here. But in any case, what I did here, I did all energy weapons on the front and the back, so that way it takes advantage of the disruptor induction coil, which means 26.2 disruptor damage for that, and then the 24.4 on the Mark 12 commons. Now these Mark 11 rares are ones that I actually looted from either playing through the story missions or just happened to stumble upon them during PvEs or STFs or what have you. So these I do have as common just because I got them off the exchange. And the other advantage of common consoles is that you can exchange them between your characters if you have multiple ones, and just kind of use them between people. For example, I have a Klingon character that I use the disruptors on almost every build, so having these as common Mark 12 is kind of a nice advantage for that. So in any case, I have all disruptor consoles here. Again, it is stacking damage amplification, but it is kind of a diminished return situation where once it's not going to be a full additional 24.4% for each console. It's more of a a scaling added bonus. So it's not that full. It's not in theory like 200% disruptor damage. In any case, we also have this field generator Mark 13. These used to be really expensive on the exchange, but now this particular one is a mission reward from one of the Delta Rising missions. So I've again put that on this ship to boost the shield capacity, because the Kabale regenerative shield, it does have a decent cap, but for example, if you have the Mako shield, which is a reputation shield, that actually can do a lot more for you. But in any case, this is a good boost to have here. Now, this build is not focusing at all on exotic damage. You can do some with this ship, but with this build, because I have cannons, I'm treating it more like a heavy escort. So essentially, we're just kind of trying to blow up everything, not necessarily with exotic damage, because it kind of is more of a trickle effect. But in any case, we also have the shield emitter amplifier, so that boosts the shield regeneration rate, which, because we have regenerative shields, that's already kind of high, higher than usual anyway, but this will boost that even more, especially when in battle. That's kind of important. Even though I do have these other shield heals, and you're going to be using active shield heals anyway, it's just kind of a bonus. We also have the power insulator Mark 12. That's if you're going against people like Borg or other villains that use draining abilities, like the Breen, for example. If you're playing through that story arc, it just kind of helps you against those particular abilities. It's not life-changing, so this again is a starter build. So once you get that Borg console or the Undine console, those things would be good to swap out this for, as this is more or less a placeholder for that. Now, the unique console with this ship is the metaphasic solar capacitor. So, as I was saying before, the Marauder has a two-piece bonus with this ship. This is where that comes into play. So this particular console, what this does is it allows the metaphasic solar capacitor. So what this does is it reduces damage to shield by 50% for 15 seconds, plus 26.6 exotic damage, then plus 29.95 for shield heals. So you can do some exotic damage with this ship. I'm not focusing on that for this build, just because exotic damage does take a little bit of extra tweaks to your builds to make it effective. So I don't really want to get into that too much here. We basically just want to pick up and go. So the two-piece set, which I will probably never get, is the plus 12.5% torpedo weapon damage, plus 18 kinetic damage distance rating, and the boost to turn rate. So that's actually a really awesome two-piece if you have the Marauder, but because of the expense of it, it's not realistic for most people. If you do like to run torpedoes, it's also going to be great for you if you combine it with the two-piece adapted Mako set. If you have access to that with your reputation, that's also going to be great, because you'd have over 30% boost to your torpedo damage without even using a tactical console for them. So that's pretty great. All that being said, let's go to our bridge officers here. So I am using a senior Romulan operative. You don't necessarily need that for your builds, but it is going to affect my DPS a little bit, so I'm actually not clocking DPS, as this again is a starter build. What I did here, there is one universal ensign station, which I did an emergency power to shields, which is my engineering guy. I also have the commander tactical, so that's why I outloaded this with, or outfitted this with cannons and cannon abilities, mostly because you get that cannon scatter volley 3 or cannon rapid fire 3. You can get those manuals off the exchange or from someone you know who can train in those. So that's actually pretty handy to get those higher end ones, because if you just use the cannon scatter volley 2, It's not quite as powerful. You'll see them in the battle here that I do coming up. But in any case, we have the attack pattern beta, tactical team 1. We also have another tactical team 1, so we can cycle through those. If you use keybinds, it's a great way to keep your shields always around you, regardless of where people are shooting you from. So you don't have to use the arrow keys to manually correct for those or what have you. Also, my engineer here is a lieutenant. That's the most you can do with this ship. So that is going to be emergency powered weapons and engineering team 2. So you can kind of alternate with these. Emergency powered weapons is definitely handy if you're playing against the if you're doing the Azure Nebula rescue, for example. The Tholians use basically an ability that disables your weapons for a few seconds. That's definitely a pain. So emergency powered weapons will immediately counteract that and also boost your weapon power. Now the cool thing about this ship, besides those setup, is that we have a Lieutenant Commander Science pilot seat, which is very unique. I believe it's a new specialization that you can give to your bridge officers. So what I did is I took the mission reward guy named Lox. He's one of the hierarchy guys. And I basically added pilot specialization because he also has intelligence abilities. The main reason I'm reusing this guy with a second specialization is because he does have a trait here, which I believe is, pirate. So basically he boosts your damage by 1.5% just by existing on your build. So it's kind of a nice passive ability, so you don't have to really worry about activating that, but you get the boost from it if he's in one of your seats on the ship. So in any case, that's why I did that. Now the kind of cool abilities that we have here, Reinforcement Squadron 2, that's basically like carrier pets that will appear and only be there for about 45 seconds, I believe. But it's kind of a nice thing to have. In addition, I'm running Pilot Team 2, so what that does is just kind of boost your turn rate, and that again is depending on your skills and how that's set up. And also we have the Lock Trajectory 1, which this is basically kind of a power slide button. So if you are just zooming away, and I'm actually going to use this in conjunction with evasive maneuvers, so the kind of nice thing about that is you would just kind of shoot around somebody, then do a quick U-turn essentially to come back and shoot right at them again. So that's pretty awesome to have for a ship like this. Again, this is also why I'm outloading it with cannons, because you can actually do a lot more damage as long as your face is pointing at the target. So in any case, that's that kind of going through here. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that we have two RCSs here, Mark 11 rare. Now these were ones that I had accumulated over time just from mission rewards. Now if you were to play at level 50, you'd probably get the Mark 12 equivalent, or like a Mark 12 uncommon or something to that effect. So you'll get a little bit more of a turn rate boost than this is giving me. But this is just kind of what I have, so that's what I equipped here. Again, if you do get that Undine console, that might be one that you want to swap out here, because you can get some set bonuses depending on what what build you're running. And yeah, if you are running a disruptor or a phaser build, just keep in mind that you want to probably focus on the Undine reputation to get those bio disruptor or bio phaser, which give you that extra damage proc. I don't have any equipped on this, again, because it says the starter build, but that's just something that you're probably going to want to aim for on a ship like this, or a ship that you're running other phaser or disruptors on. So now that that is out of the way here, another thing I wanted to show you is that with those two RCSs, just those not uncommon but rare Mark 11s, it essentially is boosting my turn rate from 12, which is about standard for a science ship, but that's also what this is, standard. It boosts from 12 to about 32, which is pretty awesome. That is also including my my skills in there, which I may get into in a later video, but for the purposes of the average player, all you really need to know is that RCS consoles are amazing. So that's basically the bottom line there. They do stack similarly to the tactical consoles, where you're not going to get 70% improvement from two 35% boosts, but you'll get, let's say, 60. I'm not sure what the exact math breaks down to, but it's definitely better than if you ran without them. Now I could do armor consoles because the hull rating on the ship is a little lower than you might expect from something that does have the 4 forward, 4 aft configuration. Usually those are tanks like the Andromeda class or the bigger cruisers or the dreadnoughts, but that's just how this is set up. It's a tier 6, so your hull rating will actually scale with level from level 40 to 60. But again, it's something that I'm not really going to focus too hard on. You can probably check the stats online, but we're just going to show you how this works in action. So I ventured out a little bit here to the Jaipur II system, only because it's one that a lot of us are familiar with, especially from the pre-Delta Rising era. So basically, something that I changed here, I did a tweak after doing a couple PvEs here. I put the tactical teams right next to each other on my tray, as well as the emergency powered weapons, because those are all very handy to have active, particularly for higher DPS. In addition, it'll also help rebalance the shields as they are regenerative shields, so the advantage of them is that they do regenerate the fastest, so having those shields spread around will be definitely better for it. Also, the ship mastery trait here is actually kind of a nice one, but it does depend on some exotic abilities for it to kick in. So basically, once you activate Energy Siphon, Tachyon Beam, or Tychon's Rift, then you basically have a 50% reduction in weapon power cost, as well as a 2.5 boost to all power settings. So this is a temporary effect, it looks like, but that's something that you'll be unlocking as you level the ship further down the road. So just something to keep in mind. It's kind of a nice bonus to have on those tier 6 ships, so that's part of why we're doing that. In any case, let's go ahead and start this Jaipur run here, see if we can get a decent run with this build. Of course, the Enterprise is coming to help.
Distress calls.
Okay, I'm going to activate my carrier pets here. Alright, so that was actually a pretty good run here. I took pretty minimal damage, because just kept those tactical teams, cycling as much as I could here. Again, I'm not using keybinds only because I haven't gotten into that, but generally this ship is actually pretty capable, and with some upgraded gear and some reputation stuff on this thing, it'll definitely bust some A. So, I just wanted to show you guys how this thing functions in combat. Even just with basic gear, it actually does decent DPS. And I didn't use an actual clock, but just based on my modifiers that I have going on here, it's about 1300-ish for each dual heavy cannon, and then about 680 once my, with my weapon power as high as it is, and some of the other modifiers. But that will obviously drop with weapon power, so when I was hovering over earlier, you kind of see what it was floating around at. It was all over 1,000 for the front, for the dual heavy cannons there, so still, at the minimum, I'm getting roughly like 4 to 6k without even really trying. So that's pretty awesome, just for a starter build here. So, in any case, I just wanted to throw that out there for ship to play with if you have it from this seasonal event. It's definitely something worth making a build for. And you really can put any kind of damage on this that you want because there's no unique consoles that specifically limit you to a certain damage type. So you really can kind of play around with this as much as you want. You can use cannons, you can use beams, you can use torpedoes, whatever floats your boat. And yeah, essentially that's about it for this ship. I personally really like it. It's something that I'll probably get to know over the next few weeks, and then maybe even make a follow-up video here in regards to something that is a little more solid, even with reputation gear and some other things, to kind of show you what it can do later on. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the stars.